Many people said, this is impossible. You won't get any fruit off them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to do that. If you're wondering what's underneath this tarp here, well, that's our new g'day. I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can grow vegetables and fruit under and around these massive surrounding trees. Let's get into it. Many people said, or still say, this is impossible. Right in the early days when I first planted this Meyer lemon and this Valencia orange, a friend of ours who was a citrus grower, or ex-citrus grower, used to do it for a living, said, look Mark, you're not going to be able to grow these trees. Well, you could grow them, but they're not going to fruit in amongst these huge gum trees right next to it. What's going to happen is the gum trees are going to suck out all the water, and not only the water, all the nutrients from these trees, and because they won't flower, you won't get any fruit off them. Well, as you can see, they are loaded with fruit, and not only loaded, they are loaded every season with fruit. So how can that be? Now, to be fair, the other thing this citrus grower offered, as in advice, was to use this fence line here, and he recommended, because this was a council easement, although you could do it on your property, it would have been easy just to get a backhoe in and dig a trench down about 2 meters all along this fence line, not to keep it open trench, but to crush all the roots that were coming through onto our property from these big gum trees. That way you sever all the roots and the gum trees can't suck up all the nutrients and water from your fruit trees. He said he had employed that method before on his property and it works quite well. I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to do that. Who wants to get a backhoe in and dig a big trench and dig up all that soil and then put it all back in? And then you have to do that apparently every several years, because of course the gum trees grow roots back. Now, I want to stress, I wasn't angry about it and I wasn't arrogant about the advice. I love getting advice. I'm not saying that I know everything about gardening, and especially back then, I had less of an idea than I do now. Practice and hindsight are all good things, experience and all that. But we live in a subtropical climate, we get plenty of rainfall. I was thinking, isn't there enough rain in this part of the world for all the trees? Really? Would the gum trees take that much nutrients away from my fruit trees? I was sort of skeptical on it. So I didn't take the advice. Down the back here, all the grass is quite long. That's because I can't get my mower in here because it's too boggy. It hasn't rained for several weeks, and you can see down the base here where the council tractor nearly started to get bogged. And in this area here, I've put down some rubble rock, which you can't see now because it's overgrown. So I've tried to make this back gate a little bit more hard standing, and even then the tractor nearly went down in it. And speaking about going down, I went down over there on the other side of our property and I actually hurt my back trying to pull the mower out. I know, I was stupid. I just thought I could move it a little bit to get it out of the bog and then I could drive off, but it didn't happen. Don't worry, that was weeks ago and my back's fine now, but I won't be doing that again. I had to get a turfer winch in to winch the thing out. My point is though, like my intuition was good from the beginning, we have plenty of water here, and even through the dry periods, and I have to say water the fruit trees, which I don't water very often at all, unless they're saplings, well then I will give them a water. But apart from that, they really have to survive on their own. And yes, if we go through a very long drought season, I understand that we need to give the trees a bit of an extra water, and so I do that, and I haven't seen any real issues. But what about nutrients? Why is it then that the nutrients aren't affected and we get so much fruit, not just from our citrus, but from all of our trees? The summer mangoes, the mulberries, even fruiting vines like dragon fruit do really well here under the canopy of these big trees. Nature often doesn't take more than it needs. And even though these big gum trees seem like they should be sucking up a lot of water, and I guess they do. And you see them along the rivers in Australia and in the outback, and they're along there for a reason. I still believe that they only take what they need. And so if there's adequate water and nutrients on your property and you've got big trees nearby, I don't think they're just going to take all those extra nutrients for the sake of it, because that could be unhealthy for those native plants. Here I am here, just walking from our main orchard. Now, we got fruit trees all around our property, but that's our main orchard over that side. Coming over to here is where I want to show you, but I want to put it in perspective. That's why I've got you up there, to show you the size of these trees and where I used to have some garden beds right underneath them here. I had 3 garden beds underneath this big gum here, and there's another 3 gums and this type of thing here, whatever that is. But the 3 garden beds went along here, and it did cause me some problems, so I want to address that. But before I do that, I do want to give you another bit of a story. About 5 years ago, this is when I started having a bit more success on YouTube. I got contacted by the president of a prominent gardening club here in southeast Queensland, and it was an email, and the lady said to call her, so I gave her a courtesy call, and we had a chat. And basically she wanted to bring her gardening group onto our property, and I explained that I really didn't want that to happen. I'm not sort of insured against that type of thing. And the crux of it was, in the process of that conversation, she said, I noticed that from your videos that your property is surrounded by large gum trees. And I said, yeah, that's true, it is. And she said, well, you know that you're not going to be able to ever successfully grow a good vegetable garden or fruit trees because of the same thing that citrus grower said. You have to either cut them down, which is bloody impossible, or maybe dig some trenches and the same old stuff. By that stage, I'd already proven that theory completely wrong, because I was successfully growing heaps of stuff. But I just thought I'd mention that other story to you, and I have got plenty of others who have, you know, respectfully tried to warn me, and I'm hesitant to be really critical of them. They're just trying to be helpful. But I just want to also explain that sometimes the experts can be wrong. So sometimes your intuitive and your gut feeling and your own observations of nature might make you more of an expert in that particular area, even for this particular property. Hey, I'm not saying that a particular property maybe in dry central Australia mightn't have an opposite effect. Maybe those gum trees don't have enough moisture or nutrients, and they could seek out your veggie patch and make havoc. I'm doubting it, but I'm leaving the door open, because I'm not such a big head to think that, like I said, I'm always right on everything, because I'm not, and I don't know everything, and I'm always learning. So that's probably one of the things I just love so much about gardening. But anyway, I moved these 3 beds here, not that 4th one, that's a new one, but these 3 big Birdie's garden beds that are now blooming 16 years old or so and still going strong. You know, raised garden beds, Birdie's raised garden beds, get into them. Links below in the description. But I moved them from over where you are now, underneath that tree. And I guess it sort of proved some of what these people were saying, that if you get too close to gum trees, like I mean right underneath them, you can run into some issues. The first issue I had was an obvious one. It was shade. Being right underneath the canopy, there was a lot of sun that wasn't getting to these garden beds. So what did I do? Well, I grew things that grew better in part shade. Things like big leafed salad crops. Even ginger did pretty good in the part shade. I don't know why. It does do better in full sun, but it still grew quite well. Strawberries did all right down here as well. But I couldn't grow any hungry crops like tomatoes and those types of things. The second problem I got was easy access for animals. The possums would climb up the tree and jump into the raised garden bed, and they would climb down the tree and jump into the raised garden beds. It drove me crazy, so I ended up having to net these raised garden beds to stop the bloomin' possums. But before that, I tried to be smart and out-clever them, and I put some tin around the tree to see if that would stop them from being able to climb up and down. Now, it didn't work. But moving the beds into a central location actually did stop the possums from going into our garden, and it still has today. They don't like to go across dead ground, especially if you've got a dog, and get into the garden beds. They don't like trying to climb up and jump into raised garden beds, so that has helped with that pest. And the third thing that was a slight issue underneath these gum trees was in fact the roots. Because the garden beds were basically right underneath the base of the gum trees, the roots were growing up into the garden bed. Up halfway through. So if you dig into the garden bed, I started finding these masses of gum tree roots. And yeah, that can be a problem because it's obstructive when you're trying to dig and till your soil, but also, yeah, it was dragging water and probably nutrients out of the bed. I don't think it was deliberately trying to find that though. I think it just thought it was the ongoing hill of soil around it. So it was just natural to grow those roots along where the soil still was above the ground. But you can see these mulberry trees and these banana trees and these raised beds here. If you're 10 or 20 meters away from these big trees, it doesn't make any difference. Look at the potatoes growing in here. Even though there's a little bit of shade, and that's mainly from my own fruit trees like these bananas, they are growing fantastic. You can see all of these garden beds here, none of them are lined at all. But that's a good point. Look at this. Do I eat it now? Wow. That's an Atherton Tablelands raspberry. Absolutely wonderful. Yes, there's nothing in the base of these raised garden beds because there doesn't have to be. When you're at least 10 or, like I said, 15 meters or so away, the roots that do get there don't tend to be very intrusive, because they don't, even with these big trees, they don't tend to come that far or want to be intrusive into the garden beds for some reason. That's just what I've learnt over this last couple of decades. However, if you are in a smaller area, or maybe you've got nowhere else to grow but underneath one of these gum trees, and you are getting these problems of the roots being intrusive, well then, before you go putting the garden beds down, I'd recommend you put a barrier down. I mean, you could even concrete it, but you can get lots of root barriers these days on the market, and that's what I'd recommend. Put down a good root barrier underneath your raised garden bed, and then whack in your hugelkultur or your soil or whatever on top of that, and that way you're not going to get any roots come up underneath your raised garden beds. Yes, you're going to have trees fall on your property when you've got a treed property like this. However, the benefits certainly outweigh the negatives. These trees, they bring bird life, and that bird life is usually good. When you've got this treed area and the birds nesting in here, a lot of birds are insect eaters. And by using this as a gateway into your backyard veggie garden, it's limiting the amount of pests that are eating your cabbages and your brassicas and your lettuce and all that. Even owls stop the mice and the rats at night, and they keep the numbers down. So there's a whole array of good things why you would want to keep all these beautiful big trees. So if you're worrying about big trees on your property affecting your veggie garden or your fruit trees, don't. It won't happen. There's probably more good things that big trees bring to your garden than negatives. And if you're wondering what's underneath this tarp here, well, that's our brand new chipper. And I'll be excited to show you that in a future video. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a big tree thumbs up, share the video around and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Cheers.